Many of us will have heard what the priest said and will have heard him on various radio programmes today, really doubling down on his position. You wear the same collar as him. Do you share his views?
No, I mean, I suppose that what I want to avoid, the easiest thing for me to do is to come here and I suppose have a go at himself and so on. I don't know him, and I don't know anything about him at all. I think I was surprised at the comments initially. Initially it was a homily, but then I thought today, I heard him a couple of times, including at lunchtime, and I was surprised that he was maybe as trenchant as he was. I didn't think it was a great interview at lunchtime. Funny, I thought the last comment from the interviewer, I think it was Brian Dobson, said that maybe it's about how the message is preached. There'd be some truth in that as well. Like people saying that he had no right to speak. Well, he was preaching at Mass, so I wouldn't doubt his right to preach at Mass. The topic of sin, obviously, is part of our, it's part of what we talk about. But I think at that point, then, you look at the hurt and the offence, and I was a bit surprised that his bishop came out as quickly. I thought that was good. I wouldn't have expected the bishop to come out. I don't mean that personally against him, but I wouldn't have thought that was going to happen as clearly and as quickly. And I think that's to be welcomed as well. But I think the thing that sort of surprised me a little bit, he made a number of times the reference that this was coming out of last Sunday's gospel. That's sort of surprising, because I preached on the same gospel. And it's actually a gospel full of joy. You know, there's this little guy called Zacchaeus who's a tax collector, and he wants to get a glimpse of Jesus. But the big story is Jesus says to him, not, we'll have a coffee or we'll have a chat, I'm staying in your house. And this is mind-blowingly full of joy that this sinner, and, you know, the tutters have a field day in the gospel, because they're all saying, does Jesus not know who he is? So I was asking myself a couple of times today, even in the car, how did we get from a gospel full of joy to a place where we're battering people over the head about their lifestyle?
In the Catechism, does it not say, Father, that being homosexual is intrinsically disordered? Is that not what that statement says, a statement coming from the Catholic Church? Yeah,
I mean, look, I don't think anybody is in any doubt about the Church's teaching about sexuality. It applies to same-sex, it applies to outside marriage, it applies to pornography, it applies to masturbation, it applies across the board. There is no debate about that. That to me isn't the debate. I thought it was very interesting when you asked the question about the relevance factor, you know.
Yeah, like, but I'm sorry to cut across you, Father, but I am looking to try and get clarity on what the Church's attitude is to something like...
You're totally correct.
Homosexuality. Does the Catholic Church think it is intrinsically disordered?
No, you can get that tonight. Just Google it. It's there. It's in the Catechism. But it's been there for years. There's nothing new about it.
So is Father Sheehy just reflecting that, as he said
Father
today?
Sheehy, I'm not here to speak to Father Sheehy, but I mean, my understanding is, I'm a bit confused how he got it from the Gospel on Sunday, but anyway, that doesn't matter. Exactly. I'm a little bit concerned about that, and I'm wondering about that. And we're all guilty of having hobby horses and stuff like that. I suppose I have learned over the years that, you know, as crusty old celibates like me, we need to be very, very careful when we're talking about sexuality. And, you know, the whole thing, this emphasis on sin and so on. Like, before I talk about sin, I need to look at the sinner in the mirror in the morning when I'm shaving before I start talking about sin. I thought Leo Varadkar, I have to say, I thought his response was fantastic. It was measured. It threw me back to the night that he welcomed the Pope. And I remember sitting listening to Leo, and my heart was filled with pride. But if you say to me that I look at Leo and I say, you're living in sin, you're going to hell, not in a month of Sundays would I think like that about Leo Varadkar, because that is not for me to say. And that's the problem.
But that's your interpretation.
No, it's not. You see, this is the thing about the interpretation. If we want to quote the gospel, we want to quote scripture, we want to quote Jesus, the whole point of last Sunday's gospel was Jesus accepted Zacchaeus and wanted to stay with him. So it's not my interpretation. The whole purpose of the message of Jesus is don't judge. If you judge, you're going to be judged yourself. Don't point the finger. Don't throw the stone.
Do you think, sorry, Donald, the Church can become more relevant again to a certain cohort of society that don't see it as relevant, and that's certainly not everybody. By listening to people like Father Joe here, who says, we're not here to judge. The message is about love and supporting each other and acceptance.
But that's the kind of the message. But the Pope has still come out and said there will be no gay marriage and affirmed that recently. And part of me listening to this whole story about the priest and about Father Sheehy wondered, is it about communication? Is it about the way that he spoke with all his judgment and his fire and brimstone and so forth? And in fact, when he says that what he's saying is the truth, there is quite a large element of truth to what he says, but we're not used to that. We're used to a pope talking out of two sides of his mouth. We're used to hearing clerics do that as well. Yeah. And it's like this sugary, accepting message. But then the facts behind what's being said don't really change.